Hey guys, it's Kendra.
And this is Jessica, and you're listening to
Lucid Lab.
I think it was last episode that I mentioned that my daughter, or maybe it was 2 episodes ago, I can't remember, we kind of recorded a couple in a row.
Yeah.
I don't know. Time has escaped me, but
it's all a blur.
I think I mentioned that my daughter was going to be in a talent show and she had a few days to prepare.
Yes.
She won it.
I know, because you were saying in the episode, she was like, Mom, will I win a place or whatever? And you're like, probably not. You literally just joined it. And yeah, I remember you sent me the video and she did a great job.
I couldn't really believe it. Yeah. I mean, I think we all screamed because we weren't expecting it. Like, she was sitting there and she's like, do you think I'll place? And I'm like, honey, I was still trying to keep her down a little bit about it. So when they called her name, I was like, holy shit, she won.
Now she's going to expect that every time, Mom.
I know. I need to. I don't know. I don't know what to do. She's just so talented. Yeah. Yesterday, she had a recital for her violin playing, and she was the only kid who composed their own song. So she wrote the whole thing, and it was like over 5 minutes. Everyone else's songs were like a minute and a half.
Right.
So that in itself was crazy. I mean, I'm biased, but she was the best one there.
She just has like this natural music talent, musician talent. Yeah.
There was one little boy who played the piano, and he was really good. He actually made me cry because he came on after my daughter. And I don't know if it's because he was already nervous or after her performance, it made him more nervous, but he kind of froze in the middle of his performance and started crying.
Aww.
And I was in the front row, so I was like, you're doing great. And everybody like chimed in and tried to give him a boost. And he ended up finishing the song, and it was impressive. So he was really good, but it was just so sad to see him break down like that.
Yeah, nerves can get the best of you, even when you're well prepared. I remember that when I did theater, and there were times you just get up there and it's like your mind goes blank. That's what I'm guessing happened to him while he was playing.
Yeah. And then there's kids like my daughter. Like, I don't think she realizes how lucky she is to just have this
natural ability
to just bounce around and want to be the star of the show everywhere. I hope it stays, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want her to end up going inward as she ages.
Yeah. I mean, she's like we've talked about before, she's a Leo. So
yeah,
she'll always enjoy being center of attention.
So it's just really cool. To experience what she's capable of.
It's fun to watch your kids. Yeah. Yep. Well, I have been Christmas shopping a lot lately. I'm almost done. I'm trying to get it all done before the stores get really chaotic and things get too picked over. I do a lot of my shopping online, so feeling really good there. I snuck out of the house yesterday to see Wicked.
Oh, yeah. I'm taking her tomorrow.
Oh, my God. It deserves any award that it gets. Like, Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, both of them are just phenomenal. I wish they could give them both a Best Actress Oscar because they're so, so good. I've seen the show like on the stage, like when they did a Broadway tour in Denver, I don't know, a few years ago. And to me, the movie's almost better because when I go see the stage shows, obviously I'm not buying front row seats. I'm way up in the top.
Right.
And in the movie, you can see their faces up close, the emotions, because it's a very emotional show. The music's beautiful. It is almost 3 hours. So
oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Be ready for that.
Okay.
We went and got a huge popcorn. Make sure you go to the bathroom before you go in because you're not going to want to leave.
Wow.
And those of you who have seen it, and if you know the story of Wicked, I'm not going to give anything away because I hate spoilers, but it is just so relevant to what is going on in America right now. Jessica hasn't seen it yet, so she'll understand what I'm talking about. There's stuff all over the social media about it. And I don't know, it made me very emotional.
Okay. So great. I'm going to have a crying little girl too. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if she'll get emotional.
She might.
It's more like adult themes, like, just understanding injustice and things like that might go over a younger person's head.
We'll see. She's dealt with a lot in her life, so.
Yeah, it's very powerful. The music's so good. There was a group of like older ladies right in front of me, and all of them were like wiping their face and sniffing. And then the lady next to me, one of my favorite songs that came on, she started singing along. And I kind of looked over at her, and then I get it. Like, I love the music too, but I don't want to hear you sing it. I want to hear Ariana sing it.
I had to stop my daughter at her recital yesterday because one of the little girls was singing like a Taylor Swift song or something. And I'm like, honey, this is not yours.
We're not at a concert. It's okay at a concert. Nowhere else.
It was cute though. Alrighty, I guess we can get into my story today. I just randomly came upon this one and I was like, hey, why not? Today we're talking about the Azaria Chamberlain case.
Okay.
If you're not aware of it, you may have heard the phrase A dingo got my baby.
That's all I know. And wasn't it Meryl Streep that was in the movie?
Yes.
The dingo ate my baby.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the name of that movie is, honestly.
It's called A Cry in the Dark.
Okay.
I mean, I watched it. She won an award for that movie, but to me, there wasn't a whole lot of acting. But maybe that was just because it was from the 80s. I don't know.
It was the best that year. Who knows what
I
else
guess.
came out?
But I think most of us have heard that.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew where it came from until I came upon this story. I didn't know it had an origin story.
Yeah, I know nothing.
Before I tell you the story, I just want to give a little bit of information on dingoes.
Okay.
In case you do not know what they are or what they're capable of, because that's a big part of this story.
Mm-hmm.
The dingo is a wild canine native to Australia and is often referred to as Australia's wild dog.
Okay. Are they cute?
They kind of look like coyotes.
Okay. They're not foxes. That's what I thought of. Okay.
No. Its classification actually remains debated. Some consider it a subspecies of the wolf, while others purpose it as a distinct species due to its unique adaptations and evolutionary history.
Okay.
They are similar to the size of coyotes, with males being larger than females. They're distinguished from domestic dogs by their longer muzzles, larger ears, and more massive molars. Their skulls are wedge-shaped and proportionately larger compared to their bodies. They are adaptable and social animals that typically live in packs from about 2 to 12.
Okay.
They are apex predators, meaning they're the top of the food chain there.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are the only threat to them.
Okay.
They primarily hunt small to medium-sized mammals such as rabbits, wallabies, and joeys.
Aw.
They are opportunistic feeders and will scavenge. They have been known to prey on livestock. They've become increasingly comfortable around humans in certain areas because wherever humans are, there's food.
So similar to what we have where coyotes or mountain lions will show up in our neighborhoods here and there and take people's pets.
Right.
Does that happen in Australia, I'm guessing?
I don't know how populous the areas are that they live, so not as much.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot of
They're more in the outback.
homes. Yeah, exactly. Dingoes breed once a year during the spring season after a gestation period of about 63 days. A typical litter consists of 4 to 6 pups. Both parents participate in caring for the young.
Very progressive.
Pups become independent around 6 months of age, but may stay with their parents for up to a year before dispersing. And I only bring up this part because I think it is relevant later.
Okay.
So now on to the family, and I'm going to start first with the mother. Lindy, as she is known, was born Alice Lynn Murchison on March 4th, 1948 in Whakatane, New Zealand.
That would be an awkward town to be from.
I know. I looked up the pronunciation, and that's how you say it. Starts with fuck.
I might want to just tell everybody where I'm from if that was my town.
I wonder if anybody there says, I live in fuck. Her parents were Avis and Cliff Murchison. She grew up in Seventh-day Adventist Church. Her father was a traveling pastor. They moved from New Zealand to Australia when she was almost 2 years old. Although they were based in Victoria, they continued moving about Australia almost every year. She gained her matriculation in Benalla in 1965 and worked as a shop assistant, clerk, and waitress during breaks. Later, she worked as a receptionist and bookkeeper. Michael Lee Chamberlain was born February 27th, 1944 in Christchurch, New Zealand, to Ivan and Greta Chamberlain. His father was a warrant officer in the Royal New Zealand Air Force. He went to Christchurch Boys High School in Canterbury before attending the University of Canterbury. At some point, his mother got involved with the Seventh-day Adventist Church and became part of the administration, and that's when Michael converted.
Okay.
In 1965, he moved to Australia and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Theology from Avondale College. I'm not positive exactly how Michael and Lindy met, but I think it was through the church where
Probably.
Lindy's father was the pastor. They met sometime before he graduated in 1968. Michael became a minister for the church and just went down that path.
Okay.
They married November 18th, 1969, and lived in Tasmania for the first 5 years of their marriage. During that time, Lindy earned a certificate in dressmaking, tailoring, and drafting from Launceston Technical College. They had their first child, Aiden, in 1973. In 1974, they moved to Bowen, North Queensland. There, they had their second child, Reagan, in 1976.
Okay.
Michael was still a minister, so they also moved around a bit. They moved to Innisfail at some point before settling in Mount Isa.
Okay.
Michael produced and presented a radio program there called The Good Life.
Okay. I'm sure it's some religious.
I mean, not really.
No,
It was
no.
based on lifestyle and culture throughout the northern parts of the state.
Okay.
So that seemed a little bit more progressive than I expected of the time.
Yeah.
They had their third child and the focus of this story on June 11th, 1980. It was their first daughter, Azaria Lauren Chamberlain. At the time, Michael was a minister for the church in Mount Isa and Lindy was a housewife, but she also made wedding dresses for people,
Okay.
including all the clothing for her children. She always wanted a little girl, so she loved making new clothes for Azaria.
I like that name.
Yeah, it's very pretty. They were just a normal, happy family. Nothing crazy going on with them. Very religious, but otherwise content and happy. When little Azaria was just 9 weeks old, they decided to go on a camping trip as a family in August of 1980. I know a lot of people do this, but the last thing I would want to do with a newborn is go camping.
9 weeks old? No.
No, especially with 2 other children to keep an eye on.
No, too much.
But they did. Aiden was either 6 or 7 at the time, and Reagan was 4.
Okay.
The plan was to visit Uluru or Ayers Rock for a few days before going fishing in Darwin. Ayers Rock is a large sandstone monolith and is sacred to the Aboriginal people of the area known as Arnangu. The area around the formation is home to an abundance of springs, water holes, rock caves, and ancient paintings.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's one of the most popular places to visit in Australia.
Okay.
It is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Lindy had been there before as a teenager, and she just wanted to go back. They got there on August 16th in the evening. With nothing to do in the dark, they just went to bed that night.
Okay.
There were many other campers there. The next day, they roamed around the site. Michael took the boys up part of Ayers Rock, and while walking around with Azaria near one of the caves called Fertility Cave, Lindy saw a dingo watching them.
Okay.
Just something that she made note of. Several people saw them, but just didn't think anything of it.
Okay.
They knew they were in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Later that night, dingoes were spotted by several people. One woman, Sally Lowe, said that one followed her to the trash can.
Ugh.
While at the barbecue area that night in front of the tents, Michael was making some food. Another couple joined them around this time and introduced themselves. I believe it was Sally Lowe and her husband.
Okay.
Michael tossed some bread to another dingo.
Don't feed them. That's just going to encourage them.
I know. Lindy told him, don't do that because it's going to encourage them. At some point before 8 p.m., Lindy took baby Azaria to the tent to put her to bed. She had been nursing her. Reagan was either already asleep in the tent or she put him down at the same time because both were now in the tent asleep.
Yeah.
Lindy then grabbed a can of beans from the car for Aiden and walked back to the barbecue area, which wasn't far. You could see their tent from this little area. It was maybe like 20 feet or so away. And the front of the tent was facing the barbecue. Lindy was gone for maybe 6-10 minutes at most.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what other people have said.
Okay.
After a few minutes of chatting, they heard what sounded like a baby cry out.
Oh, no.
Lindy was sure that Azaria was asleep, but she went to check immediately. And about halfway to the tent, she saw a dingo leaving the tent.
Oh, my God.
She rushed to look inside, and Azaria was gone.
I can't imagine.
Panicked, she climbed out of the tent and screamed, "Dingo's got my baby."
Right.
Or, Michael, the dingo's got my baby." She tried running in the direction she thought the dingo had gone, but it was too dark.
Right.
She screamed for a torch. A torch is a flashlight there.
Okay.
As more heard the commotion, others joined in to search for little Azaria. Sally Lowe tended to Aiden and Reagan as Lindy and Michael were frantically searching.
Oh, what a helpless situation for them.
I don't even know what I would do. I don't know what I would do.
I can't.
I would panic.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to shut off at that moment, but I might.
Yeah.
Like just crumble. I might pass out.
Like, I can't
Your
believe this is
baby
my life right now. Like,
taken
this
in
is
the middle of the
happening.
night.
Yeah.
While grabbing Reagan from the tent, Sally Lowe saw blood
Oh
on the
my God.
blankets. There was blood on a sleeping bag, and there was some on the wall of the tent. She said there was actually a little puddle.
Oh.
And of course, she's trying to hide that from the boys. So
Mhm.
just scary. Shortly after, rangers were notified. Ranger Derek Roth and Constable Frank Morris organized a search party of 250 to 300 people. They searched that night and it lasted until like 3 a.m.
Okay.
A man named Murray Habby, who was also camping there that night, and he was next to the Chamberlain tent.
Okay.
And he had taken a picture of a dingo just 20 to 30 minutes before this happened. He was sitting inside his van. It was outside. So he knew there's dingoes. And so he went to the Chamberlain tent and he found tracks leading from the tent.
Mm-hmm.
He followed them and they led to a depression in the sand with something wet next to it.
Oh, no.
But it was really dark. He assumed that it was blood.
Mm-hmm.
He called Ranger Roth and another tracker, a native animal tracker, to investigate. Upon studying the depression in the sand, they concluded that it was a knitted weave of some sort.
Okay.
They followed the tracks until they faded away once the tracks hit a road, and they couldn't pick up the tracks after that again. Michael and Lindy did not help with this larger search, which people sometimes criticize. I know there's 300 of them out there. They have 2 little boys to take care of.
Right. They don't know where they're going. It's the middle of,
Right.
Let the experts do what they do.
They just stayed in the barbecue area until someone told them, that they need to get out of there. And so they were taken to a nearby motel to wait for news.
Oh my goodness. What torture for the parents to just sit there. You know that it's probably not going to end well.
I know. The scary part is you probably knew instantly.
Yeah, when you saw blood in there.
Yeah, it's a baby.
Mm-hmm. And it's a large wild animal.
That wants food.
Yes.
Sadly.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been right around the time the couple of dingoes had just recently had babies.
So they needed the food.
Right. The young might have been a month or 2 months old. And so they were probably scavenging, looking for whatever they could because there was more mouths to feed. Sadly.
Right.
I hate talking about it because it's a baby, but
I know.
I think that that's the reality of why they're going into these camps and grabbing what they can.
It's part of the camping experience. We know that all too well in Colorado. We know wherever you camp, you're in their territory.
Yeah.
And they don't know us as being anything other than another animal in the area that they can attack when needed. We hear of that in Colorado with mountain lions. Same thing. They're opportunistic.
Yeah.
And they go after, toddler age children out hiking or camping.
Just like they would a child of another species, you know, a baby elk or whatever. They're going to grab the little ones.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure you could tell Azaria was never found.
Oh.
And it was trial by media.
Like she was a bad mom kind of stuff?
Way more than that. This became one of Australia's most notorious and controversial legal cases. The Chamberlains maintained that a dingo had taken their baby, but authorities were set on proving otherwise.
What?
Yeah.
What other thing could have happened?
At first, people were on the Chamberlain side, but as the media started to spread misinformation, more and more people thought that they had something to do with Azaria's disappearance and now her death.
That seems ridiculous to me.
I know. About a week after the disappearance, Azaria's jumpsuit was found about 2.5 miles from the tent by a tourist.
Okay.
The collar was covered in blood and there were gashes in the material.
From a wild animal.
Well, this was the evidence police needed to conduct further investigation. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But Lindy was adamant that her little sweater or matinee jacket was missing. It wasn't included in the items that they found.
Okay.
And this will become a big part of the story. At the initial inquest or court hearing, which is stupid that it's even happening, evidence was presented of dingoes having been seen in the area on the evening of the 17th before Azaria disappeared, although specific testimonies were left out. Some of the people that were there were not called upon. Arguments were made that a dingo couldn't carry a baby away.
A baby's the same size as a baby kangaroo, Joey.
I know. It's preposterous.
And also
ridiculous.
What's the motive for the parents to go to a campsite where there's lots of people around to murder their baby? This doesn't make any sense.
There's never a motive that can be proven at any point in this story because there isn't one.
No.
And of course, the prosecution's just going to say it's not our job to prove a motive. That's what they always say when they actually can't think up one. It's not our job to do that.
Okay. What's the murder weapon then?
I'm going to get to it all.
Okay.
Don't worry. So Azaria's jumpsuit, booties, nappy, and singlet were examined. The prosecution's case was largely circumstantial, but they pushed for homicide.
Oh my God.
Alice Springs magistrate and coroner Dennis Barrett conducted the first inquest from December 15th, 1980 to February 20th, 1981, and he concluded that a dingo had taken Azaria, but that there was interference with the clothing by a, quote, person or persons unknown, and that possibly the body of Azaria was taken from the possession of the Dingo and disposed of by an unknown method by a person or persons, name unknown.
Okay.
And this comes down to the clothes, which I'll come back to. But he was clear that he did not believe any member of the Chamberlain family was responsible. He was critical, rightly so, of the police investigation and of the Northern Territory Police Forensic Science Section. And I'm going to get into all of that because just wow. All of this just should have never happened.
No.
And I'll tell you why. But the prosecution didn't take that lightly. Many felt attacked by the coroner for shoddy police work. They didn't like being called out by this guy, and they challenged it. And they just weren't done going after Lindy.
Yeah.
The initial inquest just fueled the fire to gather more, quote, evidence, and the Chamberlains became everyone's new obsession.
Wow.
Their lives were taken apart, and like with so many cases we've seen, everyone dissected the way they acted. Some argued that their behavior after Azaria's disappearance was too calm and unusual for grieving parents. People even questioned how attractive and put together they were. Like, how can you continue taking care of yourself after losing a baby?
Because you have 2 other kids to like show up for?
Exactly.
What the fuck? People are so
I know.
ready to just tear other people apart.
It's true. And she was very attractive, you know,
Okay.
and she was always put together. She made her own clothes. She always had a really nice dress on. But you're not going to just all of a sudden become a homeless person. Like,
Right.
especially back then, women were taught to be proper and put together, especially as a pastor's wife or whatever.
Oh, I'm sure,
so
yeah.
just things weren't taken into consideration.
Like, I grew up where my mom wouldn't be seen without makeup on.
Exactly.
Anywhere. Like,
And
that's just part of life.
I grew up that way too. Like
Yeah.
my mom told me don't leave the house without makeup.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, things have changed over the years and
Yeah,
stuff.
it took me a
but-
while to get there. Probably not until my mid to late 30s.
Right. I still do that. I don't leave the house looking like I rolled out of bed.
No. And sometimes that helps make you feel better when you're going through something chaotic. If you can at least like make yourself look nice,
Exactly.
you feel better.
Take care of yourself.
It's a shield.
Right. Lindy would say later that they didn't know how to act and really struggled with it. They were heartbroken, but tried finding reason to move forward, struggling with their own faith while in the public eye.
Yeah. And that baby was only 9 weeks old. She's still recovering from childbirth, could have postpartum. You don't even know
You
what
don't
this
know.
poor lady was already going through.
You know, if they smiled, they were judged. If they showed no emotion, they were judged. There was just no way to prove to anyone how they really felt. And this just became a whirlwind. Like, that's just
Wow.
what it was. Everybody started blaming them. The media, of course, was no help in any of this. A rumor spread that Azaria's name meant sacrifice in the wilderness,
What the fuck?
and that the Seventh-day Adventist Church was actually a cult that killed infants, and
What?
it was part of this bizarre religious ceremony.
Yeah, that's why they once again went to a campsite where there was plenty of other people around.
I know. And then there's a rumor that Lindy was a witch. People went so far as to question why Lindy had Azaria dressed in all black one day
What the fuck?
when she took her to a doctor's visit or something, as if that was proof of who she was.
Why is it always women? We have to be a witch.
I know.
Like, always.
It was actually an outfit that she had made for Reagan and just passed it down to Azaria. Like, it's just clothes,
And
people.
kids like throw up on their clothes all the time. You have to change them multiple times throughout the day.
I know.
When they're babies like that. Come on.
This was the 80s, I guess. Good golly. Azaria actually means helped by God. Lindy chose the name out of a book called 1001 Unusual Baby Names. And she chose it for its meaning, helped by God, because it was the feminine form of Azaria, spelled with an H, which is an Old Testament name.
Okay.
So makes sense
Mm-hmm.
for who they were. Michael was quoted as having said stuff like, "The dingo has taken our baby and she is probably dead by now. Whatever happens, it is God's will."
That sounds like what anybody who's like super faithful would say to try and get through.
It's true. He denies saying this, though.
Oh.
It was rumored he said this the night of the search
Oh.
and why he didn't join the larger search. You actually see this in the movie if you watch it in
Okay.
A Cry in the Dark. He like stops everybody before going on the bigger search and says this, but this never happened.
Yeah, that would be weird at
But
that time.
It was pushed enough that it became part of this movie later, which just sucks, you know?
Yeah.
Michael later says that everything spewed about him commending God for taking his daughter is just utterly untrue.
It's bullshit. Yeah.
Interviews with the Chamberlains were manipulated as well. They would record them saying something and then like cut to a different scene with like the interviewer asking a completely different question and then tacking on their response to whatever they had answered before, just making them look one way or another. And this was pushed out there for everybody to see. Articles were manipulated to stir the emotions of readers into seeing her as guilty. For instance, in a magazine interview that Lindy did, which she agreed to do because the interviewer guilted her into it, essentially saying like, you don't want this happening to another child, do you? So she did it. It's not exactly the journalist's fault in this case because she testified later that she didn't change the story. Someone else did. Like she went on vacation. The article came out and she saw it wasn't the same thing that she wrote.
Oh.
But there was mention of Lindy having done a thesis on dingoes.
Okay.
This was not true.
How would that fit into any of the things that she did?
Studied it and like she tried to blame it on the dingo but she knew everything about dingoes and blah, blah, blah. Just stupid stuff.
She was a dressmaker. Like all the things you told me she got in schooling, where would a dingo project have come in? That's silly.
During the actual interview, when she was asked about her life, there was some mention of Lindy having been a pathfinder as a child.
Oh, okay.
Which is like a Girl Scout.
Yeah.
And one of the badges, they had to discuss 5 wild members of the canine family as part of learning about Australian wildlife, and a dingo was one of them. She wrote a whole freaking paragraph about dingoes, and somehow it was spun to her having done her college thesis on it. That's how
ridiculous.
Stupid media is. It's ridiculous.
They've always been stupid, apparently. We thought it was just a modern time problem.
And imagine being them and watching all this shit come out, being said about you, and you're like, what?
Where the fuck did that come from?
And no one is there with good intentions to allow you to, speak on any of it and saying that's not true. And at the same time, you probably don't care because you're in your grief and you're just trying to fucking live.
Right.
Ugh. It was just an absolute witch hunt. The news sources knew it and they fed the beast. That's what it was. A second inquest started in Darwin in September of 1981. At this point, their home was searched. Items were taken, including their car, which was a 1977 yellow Holden Tirana hatchback.
Okay.
Azaria's jumpsuit was sent to London for a second opinion, and the car was flown to Alice Springs for forensics. What came from this resulted in charging the Chamberlains for Azaria's murder.
What?
And they were committed for trial in September of 1982.
Oh my God.
Here's what the prosecution had to say and what was presented. The Crown alleged that Lindy had left the barbecue area with Azaria, went to their car, and cut Azaria's throat in the front seat.
Okay.
She then hid the baby's body in a large camera case, cleaned up as much blood as possible, and after doing all that, which only took 5 to 10 minutes, with
she's a professional, I guess.
No blood on her, no change in her attitude, rejoined the group of campers and fed her son a can of baked beans before going back to the tent and crying out that a dingo had taken the baby. It was also alleged that at a later time that night, while other people from the campsite were searching for Azaria, that she somehow, along with Michael's help, had time alone in the chaos to then dispose of the baby's body.
This sounds absolutely preposterous.
All right, so what is the evidence to support this?
Yeah.
The key evidence came from the jumpsuit and the car. The coroner who performed the second inquest in London said that although the evidence was to a large degree circumstantial, he concluded that the Chamberlains knew dingoes were in the area, attempted to simulate a dingo attack, recovered Azaria's buried body, removed her clothing, damaged the clothing by cutting it, rubbed the clothing in some vegetation, and then deposited the clothing for later discovery. It's like choosing the most ridiculous scenario and being like, doesn't this make sense, guys?
Haven't they ever heard of Occam's razor, where the most simple possibility is usually what it is?
Exactly. He also stated that the cuts in the clothing could not have been made by a dingo and that it was done by small scissors.
Okay, where were the scissors, dude?
Well, they end up claiming that the scissors were from her.
And what did she cut the baby's neck with?
The scissors.
And then they didn't find the scissors? They just
Well,
assumed?
they did.
Okay.
It was part of what they grabbed from the house.
Okay.
But don't worry, I'm literally going to get to every part.
This is ridiculous.
As far as the car goes, the Crown forensic scientist, Mrs. Joy Cole, claimed that they found evidence of fetal hemoglobin in the front seat and in other parts of the front area of the car. Fetal hemoglobin is only present in infants that are 6 months or younger.
Okay.
With Azaria being only 9 weeks old at the time, they saw this as absolute proof for their story and that they killed her.
Okay.
They tried to prove that a dingo can't carry a 10-pound baby in its jaws by bringing out a 10-pound bucket of sand and some dude, a human dude, trying to hold on to it with his teeth.
You're not a fucking dingo.
This was
with
part
a huge
of
head.
the trial. He's like, see what I prove?
What in God's name is going on in Australia?
This is how stupid it was. The forensic expert, Professor James Cameron, also gave evidence that while studying plaster casts of dingo jaws, it was impossible for a dingo to open its jaw wide enough to encompass a child's head. And they had like this little plastic thing of a dingo jaw in trial and like stuck a baby doll's head in it and say, see, it doesn't fit.
Well, he probably didn't grab it by the head, you dumbass. He probably grabbed it by the torso or an arm or a leg. Like,
well, he probably did grab it by the head or the neck.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, what? That doesn't prove anything.
I know. It's just
he could have drug it out of the tent.
The way that they handled this, I imagine like 2 5-year-olds who had to come up with a story and stand there in front of their parents and argue their case. Like, that's what this felt like.
Yeah, like when you're learning how to debate.
Yeah, exactly. The defense fought back as much as they could, but they were not allowed to test any of the items themselves. The Northern Territory Attorney General had argued personally before the Territory Supreme Court for evidence to be withheld from the Chamberlains, and it was granted. So they could only fight back with knowledge they had and tried to anticipate what evidence was going to be presented.
Right.
Azaria's garments were highly in question. The matinee jacket was still missing, which the prosecution just dismissed. They said Lindy was lying, pretty much.
Okay.
That it ever existed.
Uh-huh.
Because they were going off of blood on the jumpsuit only. But the matinee jacket was over the jumpsuit when she put her to sleep.
Right.
So the full story is not there, and that's why they're dismissing her. They also argued against the way in which the clothing was found. And this is where that first guy comes into play, how he feels like it was messed with. It was shoddy police work.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecution claimed that the clothes were deposited there intentionally by someone.
Okay.
And this was because of the way that the clothing was photographed. It was somewhat folded.
Okay.
And that claim was right because it was kind of folded, but it was done by the cops.
I was about to say because someone touched it first.
In her defense, the person who actually found the baby's items, Wally Goodwin, said that they were not in that way when he found them. They were spread about.
Like a wild animal.
But the cop had picked it up and kind of arranged it. Not necessarily intentionally, but he picked it up. He was looking through it, you know, probably for baby body parts, to be honest. And he tried to like put it back down in the way that he found it, but he didn't because he didn't pay attention to anything.
Right, because he's a man. No, I'm kidding.
The jumpsuit, when it was found, it was actually kind of scrunched up in like a top to bottom manner, which makes sense if you're a dog paw
trying to get it
like
off,
pushing it off a baby. That makes sense. But they weren't able to do that again. They weren't able to recreate exactly how an animal would have left such items.
Yeah.
And so when he took a picture, it looked like someone just put him there.
Because someone just did.
I know. And
but
someone...
it was the cop.
Exactly. And someone testified to this, but it was still this whole part of the story that someone went back and put these clothes there. It's stupid. And although it wasn't discussed during this trial, it was discovered later that the clothing was found only 98 feet from a dingo den.
Okay, there you go. Ding, ding, ding.
I don't know if it was left out intentionally or they literally just didn't know, but you would think they would.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just one part I don't have the answer to.
Mm-hmm.
Eyewitnesses did testify that they saw dingoes that night in the area, and all of the people from the campsite believed that Lindy and Michael were innocent.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about having heard a baby's cry after the time that the prosecution is alleging that Lindy had already killed her.
Okay.
Because it happened when she went back to the car.
Yes.
How could they have heard a baby cry if she had already murdered the baby?
Right.
The defense also provided evidence that other organic compounds can result in similar findings when it came to the fetal hemoglobin, which included mucus from the nose and even chocolate milkshakes.
Interesting.
Both of which were discussed as being present substances in the car. Lindy said that Azaria had thrown up during one of the car rides.
I'm sure.
Which I believe because...
it's baby.
Well, and back then they were put in little frickin' baskets. Yeah. Like, you know?
Car sick.
Bumpy rides lead to babies throwing up, and my daughter did it plenty. The windy mountain roads makes babies puke. But back then, we didn't have the same testing that we do now when it comes to blood. They claimed to find blood in 22 spots, but those spots were actually not what they determined them to be. For the defense, the pathologist, Barry Bocher, said that there was something in the car curdling the agents, but his details were too technical for the jury to understand.
Awesome.
Which he regrets,
Yeah.
He feels partially responsible for not being able to connect with them a little bit better. I'm going to come back to this particular part in the evidence. There was also one spot under the glove box of the car that they claimed to be blood, which they actually described as fetal arterial spray because there were multiple hardened drips on this one bracket. And I'm going to come back to that too. Since the Chamberlain defense did not have access to any of the evidence, they had to rely on reading the Crown's forensic scientist notes. That's all they had. It was quite clear that the tests had been incomplete. They could tell that. And in one test, the defense's pathologist could tell that the test was done wrong.
Awesome. Good work.
But the defense could not say what the substances in the car really were because they weren't allowed to test it. So
is that legal?
I know. Well, a judge can decide.
Yeah.
We have come upon this in other court cases where they try to hold on to all of what they're going to present.
Yeah,
I think it happened in
surprise.
the DeFeo family. Remember, the court ended up not letting them have some of that stuff for a long time. Anyway, there was also testimony to the fact that Dingo's teeth can, in fact, cut through fabric, you fucking nimwits.
Right.
They're strong enough to cut through motor vehicle seat belts. It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
These are meat-eating apex creatures. Why are we discussing if their teeth can do the damage to that little dress?
So did they bring a human male in that tried to gnaw the dress? Is that what the next piece?
I mean, they might have.
And he's like, look, my teeth can't do this. What the fuck?
So the person who presented this, his name was Les Harris, who had been studying dingoes for over a decade up to that point. He also mentioned that they are very precise in getting things out of things.
Okay.
He personally watched a captive female dingo remove a bundle of meat from its wrapping paper with the paper mostly left intact.
I believe that. Look at what even just our dogs can do with toys and treats and the Kong treats that they get outside. Dogs, canines, whatever, are super smart.
They're more than capable of taking off some clothing.
Yes.
To combat the whole idea that a dingo couldn't fit a baby head in its jaw, Les Harris, who was at the time the president of the Dingo Foundation, gave evidence that his opinion based on years of studying dingoes is that a dingo could have enveloped the head of the baby in its mouth and carried the weight of the baby over a very long distance. He even produced photographs of dingoes enveloping the head of a baby-sized doll in its jaws. So it's literally in complete contrast of what the prosecution is trying to show the jury. Look, it doesn't fit. And here's someone who actually works with dingo and says,
knows them.
It fits.
Yeah, all the time. They do it every day.
It's dumb. It's dumb. But this was a media storm. The whole thing was televised. So, of course, everybody's looking at their faces and being like, yeah, they are guilty.
They look guilty. Look how nice her makeup looks. She has to be guilty.
And despite the defense's case, the jury convicted Lindy of murder
oh my God.
On October 29th, 1982. The initial vote of the 12 jurors was 4 guilty, 4 not guilty, and 4 undecided, but decided on guilty in just 6 hours and 15 minutes.
Damn.
She was sentenced to life imprisonment.
Oh my God.
With hard labor. Michael was also found guilty, but for an accessory after the fact. He was given a 3-year suspended sentence. So thankfully, the boys did not have to go live with someone else. They were still with their dad.
Okay.
And he just couldn't get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And something I haven't mentioned yet is during this trial, since it happened in 1980 and we're almost 2 years later in this trial, Lindy was pregnant again.
Oh, no.
During the trial, she was visibly very pregnant.
Okay.
But instead of it garnering any sympathy, it got her ridicule. Those who believed her saw it as a demonstration of her innocence and commitment to family, but her detractors believed the pregnancy was a deliberate ploy.
Oh my God.
They saw her as evil.
They
how dare you get pregnant again? You killed your other baby. This is a slap in your baby's face type of attitude around it. She ended up giving birth to their 4th child, Kalia, another girl, in November of 1982 at the Darwin Hospital while in custody of the Darwin prison.
Oh my God.
They gave her 1 hour with her before they took her away. Interestingly, she was released on bail the following day, pending her appeal hearing, but the baby was not given to her. She ended up going to foster parents, Wayne and Jenny Miller.
Aww.
And Lindy wasn't out for long. The federal court unanimously rejected the appeal on April 29th, 1983, and Lindy went back to prison.
Oh my God.
Michael did have Kali at one point. I'm just not sure when and why she ended up in foster care. Probably because she was a little baby girl and all of this was about a little baby girl. But I know about this foster care situation because it's actually listed on the site, put together with the help of Lindy herself.
Okay.
In regards to the timeline of everything over the years. Then another appeal failed February 22nd, 1984. At this point, more information is starting to come out in favor of Lindy's innocence, and groups are forming to help get her out.
Good.
A petition was signed by 150,000 people, but nothing came from that.
What?
That's a lot of people.
Why do these people want to like persecute this woman so badly?
Because it makes them look bad if they don't.
I guess.
In November of 1984, Lindy applied for release because the foster parents of Kalia were backing out. I'm not really sure why, but her release, of course, was rejected. And then Kalia went to another set of foster parents, Owen and Jan Hughes. After this, there was an innocence committee that was formed, and they filed for new evidence to be considered. But they were ignored, typical of all these appeal things. But people started talking. Eyewitnesses from that night who always knew that the Chamberlains were innocent, said that police who came to them asking for statements already had their minds made up. From the beginning, it was clear that they wanted to hang Lindy for murder. When the eyewitnesses began to describe what they had seen or heard, the police told them that they, quote, did not want to hear anything about a dingo. This is a murder investigation, and that they expected an early confession from Lindy, and that they didn't even expect it to go to trial. They told one witness, Murray Habby, who I've mentioned, he's the one with the picture of the dingo in the van, and he found the tracks. They told him outright during questioning that they were only interested in information that would convict Lindy of murder.
What the hell? Why would you show up as police and be like, okay, this woman definitely murdered her baby? I don't get this. It's a witch hunt.
He was flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Clearly no confession happened, but they already fudged up so much of the investigation. These cops had no choice but to follow through with their pursuit because they messed up.
Yeah.
At the second inquest, the government even offered Lindy a choice, which is proof of all of this. Say that she was guilty and go free.
What?
Or continue to insist that she was innocent and she'll go to jail.
So it's a fucking male ego trip again that they just can't. Why do we hear this in too many instances? It was scary.
All to cover their own asses.
Yes.
For how they handled this. It came out later that the forensic specialist, Mira Fogarty, who was sent to document the scene that morning, had only been on the job for 3 months.
Okay.
She did not know what she was doing and admitted to reading the newspaper that day and the following days to come up with what she said in her report.
Oh, wow.
She admitted the influence of media to determine what she concluded of the scene. I saw an interview with this lady and she kind of just laughed about it, that she was in a roundabout way responsible for what happened to the Chamberlains.
How do you laugh about that, you stupid
I found
bitch?
her very weird.
What the hell?
It's almost like she was still not all there when it came to everything.
Yeah.
She knows her part in it.
Yeah.
She produced something that was used to go after them, even after admitting that she had no idea what she was doing and that they should have never chosen her to do that work.
That is just appalling.
As far as the blood goes, the car was not awash in blood as the prosecution presented it.
Mm-hmm.
It came out in the trial that the lab had destroyed the test samples after the findings had been recorded.
Because they knew they didn't have anything.
How do you destroy them? That doesn't make any sense. And the Crown testing had used up all of the supposed blood in testing, and there was no more available for the defense to test.
This is just a total setup.
But Barry Bocher, the defense pathologist, knew the tests were wrong, and he was kind of adamant about proving this in the years after. All the spots they claimed to have found fetal blood, it was actually something else. The Chamberlains happened to live in a mining town, Mount Isa. And in Mount Isa, the dust in the air is filled with copper oxide. The dust tests positive just as fast as blood in the same tests used to determine that it was fetal blood.
Oh, wow.
The pathologist, for fun, went to this town with his wife one day and tested all over the town.
And it all showed fetal blood?
Every single test came back positive.
Okay.
Every surface of that car, if tested, would have come back positive.
That's scary.
It is. It is. What was seen as overwhelming evidence to Azaria's murder in the car was just overwhelming evidence that they lived in this mining town.
Oh my God, how frustrating.
For the bracket under the dashboard, they said were bloodstains from arterial spray was actually a coating spray imperfection or an imperfection of something called a sound deadener. And this was found in 10% of cars of the same model.
Oh, great. So it was just a manufacturing mishap or whatever.
They confirmed this by finding other cars and checking this exact same spot under the glove box. They also showed the same imperfections, and it tested positive because of the same dust that could be found on any surface they tested.
Yep.
And then we get to the issues with the jury. The jury did not know that the defense had not been allowed to do its own testing.
Okay.
One juror even wrote in their notes, why didn't the defense test the blood in the car? Was it because they didn't dare take the chance? Or did they and obviously could not tell us the results because, some members of the jury had already made up their minds before the trial, with at least one juror boasting to neighbors that he was glad he was on the jury so that he could get the bitch.
Oh my God. How was he passed when they did the interviews?
I think this is just one of those things. We've had these cases where
it's too much media attention.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere that they can go where someone doesn't already have an opinion.
Right.
One juror said that she thinks they all came into trial assuming she was guilty just from all the media and what they had been fed up to that point. She said that she was led along like everyone else, though now she's embarrassed to admit it.
Right.
She now believes in their innocence. Some of the jurors were found to have been associating with the cops after sessions and trial.
Wonderful.
And some of the jurors simply found the trial just too difficult to understand.
They were just too dumb. That's always been one of my biggest
critical thinking.
If I ever ended up in front of a jury, some of these people really, they don't even have a fifth grade. What did they say the average in America was in the election? It was like a sixth grade reading level, which is really scary and kind of explains why we got the results we did. But I don't want people who can't even fucking read a high school level book.
Yeah, to determine your life.
They're not going to understand, like you said, when Botra was up there talking, they're tuning out and counting ceiling tiles because it's way over their head.
Exactly. And that's why it ultimately came down to that. Their decision came down to the evidence that was presented by the prosecution. They felt like Mrs. Cole, the forensic scientist, just was easier to understand, and they could not understand him.
And also people who are not understanding what exactly happened. You get into a room and there's 4 people you said that knew right away they thought she was guilty, and then they sway these other people.
It's probably because internally they're like, I know this is wrong, but I don't have a rebuttal here.
Yeah.
And there's these other 4 people who are so adamant, look, this is evidence. Look at the blood.
And they're like, let's get out of here. I don't want to be here for another 6 hours.
Right.
We know this happens in other juries as well. It's just
And then there was this
scary.
One juror who this is, again, just going back to this 6th grade reading level mentality. She said that the judge, when sending them away, had summed up for an acquittal. And some of them thought that he literally told them to go into the room and find her guilty because they didn't know what the word acquittal means.
So he said the word acquittal and they thought that meant convict.
Yeah. They thought that was their job, was to go find her guilty. It's just ridiculous. The jury is just always an issue in these types of cases. Mm-hmm. When you come back and look at all the details, you're like, what? Of course she got, sentenced for murder. There's other things, though. Early on in the case, the facts showed that for the 2 years before Azaria went missing, Uluru Chief Ranger Derek Roth, which I mentioned before, had been writing to the government urging a dingo call and warning of imminent human tragedy.
Well, there you go.
Roth noted that the dingoes in the area were becoming increasingly aggressive, approaching and sometimes biting people, and had attempted to take off with small children on several instances. But no, a dingo would never do that.
But let's not put that in the trial for everyone to look at.
One thing I haven't mentioned are hairs that were found.
Okay.
Animal hairs were located in the tent and on her jumpsuit.
Oh, there you go.
The prosecution argued that the hairs were from a cat, even though they had no way to prove why there would be cat hairs.
I was going to say, did they have cats?
They didn't
in
have
house?
any animals. These hairs were completely disregarded. Like
That's
it was
so
brought
dumb.
up and just
Oh
disregarded.
my God.
But a man, Hans Brunner, who happens to be one of the world's foremost experts on mammal hair, he was in Australia at the time, and he called the police just a few weeks after information was released about the hairs that they had found. He asked to look at the hairs. He told them, I can identify them.
Right.
The police told him no.
Of course they did.
The policeman he talked to on the phone actually said, no, that can't be done. She's done it anyhow. And he hung up on him.
Wow. These cops just wanted her to fry.
Yep. It wouldn't be until after everything was said and done that he was given access to the hairs and evidence. And he determined right away that they were dingo hairs, not cat hairs. For him, it was really personal because had they let him look at the hairs in the beginning, this would have never gone to trial.
Right.
But with all of this information coming to light, it still didn't matter. The appeals process does not go over the evidence. It looks at the process, meaning the case, how it was presented, if it was legally presented correctly to the jury, blah, 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 because it's up to them to make the decision. Even though some of the appeal judges felt that the verdict of guilty was wrong,
Okay.
because it's getting to that point, they upheld the right of the jury to make that decision that they had.
Even though your jury was obviously not up to the task. Come
Right.
on. Like, you got to stand up for what's right.
If there was any new evidence refuting the claims of the Crown, they could be heard in the appeals court, but only with new evidence, which they had, overturning so many things and proving them otherwise, but the appeal was still denied.
Wow.
So the universe stepped in and gave them brand new evidence,
Okay.
even though it came at the cost of someone else's life.
Mm.
It's a sad twist, but in early 1986, a British tourist, David Brett, fell to his death from Ayers Rock during an evening climb.
Okay.
Because of the vast size of the rock and the nature of the terrain below, it took 8 days before his remains were found.
Mm-hmm.
And where he was discovered was in an area full of dingo lairs.
Oh.
While searching the area for any of his missing bones that dingoes might have carried away, Azaria's missing matinee jacket was found.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. With the discovery, it triggered an immediate response. On February 7th, 1986, the senator of the time, Bob Collins, forced a local reporter, Frank Alcorta, to confirm the finding, which he had, and it had already been identified by Lindy. And he wrote an article. He took that article to the Northern Territory government and threatened to print it if they did not release Lindy from prison by noon the next day.
Wow.
And they did.
Okay.
Doing this, though, triggers another investigation as to how someone could be so wrongfully prisoned.
Right.
So the case was reopened.
Okay.
Lindy remains out of prison, but it was an effort to fully clear their name.
Mm-hmm.
Her and Michael's convictions were not overturned until September 15th, 1988.
Okay.
And it still wasn't enough because there's that lingering question out there still. The Chamberlains wanted their name free from being tied to even an inkling
Yeah.
that they could have murdered their own baby girl.
Yeah.
While they sought justice, Lindy and Michael's marriage dissolved.
That's sad.
Yeah, Lindy will say everything they had been through wasn't the cause of their divorce. They were already kind of on the road to divorce before they lost Azaria.
Oh, okay.
But it was losing Azaria and everything they went through that actually kept them together and
Oh,
why they ended
okay.
up having another child. Once she was out, the truth of a failed marriage showed itself again and they divorced. She doesn't feel her personal relationship with him and why they separated is really anybody's business. So
Because
there's
it's not.
it's true. So there's not a lot of information as to why. Over the next few years, the kids were kind of separated between the two of them. Lindy ended up meeting a man in 1992. They fell in love really fast, and he proposed after just a couple of months.
Okay.
Around the same time, Lindy and Michael received $1.3 million in compensation for wrongful imprisonment,
Good.
which seems like a lot, but it wasn't. It covered less than 1/3 of their legal expenses.
Yeah, they were probably having a lot to do.
Yeah. But in December of 1992, Lindy married her new beau. His name was Rick, and they moved here to the U.S., to Washington.
Okay.
I'm sure to feel freedom from what she probably felt.
Yeah, you
In
go in
Australia.
a store there or anything,
Right.
everybody just looks at you.
Exactly. At this time, she had custody of Reagan and Kalia, Aiden stayed back in Australia, but he was old. He was like 19 or 20 at the time, so it was his decision. Michael also married again, and he ended up having another daughter, Zara. A third inquest in 1995 left a different coroner saying that her death could not be determined based on the evidence provided, and that left a lot of people upset.
Yeah.
So that's just something that's going on for a little while, and they have to keep fighting.
Okay.
Lindy ended up not staying here in America too long. She moved back to Australia in December of 1995 because her parents were getting up there in age, and she did want to be closer to her son again. It would not be until June 12, 2012, that coroner Elizabeth Morris reported her finding at the end of a fourth inquest that Azaria had been taken by a dingo and that a dingo was responsible for her death in 1980. Michael went on to get his doctorate in philosophy and teach English and history in high school before running for Senate.
Oh, okay.
He was not elected. He retired from teaching in 2008, and he wrote 4 books. One of them, of course, was about everything that had happened.
Yeah.
Lindy had published a book too. In 2016, he became a professor, but he sadly passed away less than a year later from acute leukemia at 72.
Oh.
I saw a video of Zara, his other daughter, who was now like 27 or 28. At the time in the video, she was a teenager. It was the first time he had been back to Uluru since it happened. And it was kind of emotional to watch.
Yeah.
But I was looking at his daughter, who wouldn't have existed if all of this didn't happen.
Yeah, true.
And I don't know, it just kind of gave me, not that I deserve closure, but it kind of gave me a little bit of closure on the whole thing to see her and how much she loved her dad and just their interaction with each other, that it kind of came full circle in a way. And in this, he had kind things to say about Lindy and who she was, even though they weren't together anymore. He said she was a beautiful, spunky, fun, but loyal person who just didn't take crap from anyone.
Yeah.
It was just good to see the mutual respect for each other after everything, despite, I know there's still tension because they did have some custody things that went on in the following years, but, you know, he respected her.
Right.
Today, Lindy is 76.
Okay.
And she's happy in Australia. She's very close with her children. And their children, to me, I know Lindy and Michael went through a lot, but the validation of having their parents' names cleared, I felt was more for the children than anything because their lives were difficult.
I can only imagine, yeah.
They were all teased so much because of this, and it heavily affected all of them.
I'm sure.
And sometimes it went further than teasing. They were tormented. Zara, Michael's daughter, at one point received just a really mean letter at their house one day about Michael's involvement and her murder and whatnot. And a few weeks later, they went together as a family on holiday just before Christmas. And when they came back, all 9 of her pet rabbits were murdered.
Oh my God.
They were all killed with a brick or a boot. They were smashed.
That's horrible.
And the pen was destroyed.
Oh my God.
Just horrible things to deal with.
Bunnies for no reason.
For no reason. So my heart goes out to the kids in this story, and I hope that they can live out their days in peace from an unnecessary taunting that they never deserved.
No, even if their parents had killed their little sister, the kids didn't deserve that.
None of it. And it's hard because in this area of Australia, it's still 50-50.
Really?
Yeah.
People believe?
Yeah.
Man, the media really can change people's brains.
Exactly. And I'm going to finish this episode by reading a letter that Lindy had published to the media on August 10th, 2010. She titled it A Letter to Open-Minded Australians.
Okay.
It's a little long, but it does give you a glimpse into what shoddy police work and media input can put a family through just to gain views, subscribers, or to save your own ass.
I was about to say, to cover up their shitty work. And yes, the media was making money off of it too.
Exactly. And in a way, they still are.
Media loves to tear people down. They do it to all of the celebrities. We see it all the time. And it's just so sick.
It is.
And we feed into it. So we need to question ourselves too.
I know. That's why I don't look at anything on TV anymore.
You just can't believe it all. I just feel like media is such a bully.
Absolutely. They choose someone and they'll just make up whatever they need to make that story interesting enough for you to listen to. The reality is it was a horrible incident and it should have been left at that.
Right.
All right. So this is what she had to say. It is hard to believe it is 30 years since my darling baby was taken. For some odd reason, everyone says you will soon forget. Why is it that people expect me to forget a part of myself? Why would you? Loss of a loved one, particularly a child, is not something you forget any more than you could get out of your mind that you once attended school. That doesn't mean you dwell on it all the time. It's simply there in the fabric of your life and history. In some ways, it seems forever, and in other ways, it is like yesterday still. Yesterday are the happy memories, and the years are the pain. I choose to dwell on the happy memories and not the pain. Dwelling on the pain is only something that those who wish you harm hope that you will do. They want you miserable. I don't wish to be miserable. That is why I learned what forgiveness really is and put it in practice. You will always hear people say to forgive, but they don't tell you how to do it, and that is key. Once you learn that, you wonder why you didn't do it before. Forgiveness is for yourself. It puts the responsibility on those who hurt you and lets you get on with your life. It does not say it is okay to hurt me, then hurt me again. It simply says, yes, you hurt me. You had no right to do that to me, but you did. I acknowledge that you did that, and I am not responsible for your actions. I will not take over the continuation of your actions towards me by allowing you or them to dwell in my mind and continue to fester and ruin my life. I've taken back control of my life and headspace and moved forward. I am moving forward, not looking backward. So I have forgiven everyone involved in creating the fiasco of the last 30 years and the public so willing to believe the worst and spread nasty rumors. Of course I have. I have handed the hurt back to those who caused it, and it is up to them as individuals to ask God to forgive them for what they did, because I forgave long ago and moved on. Oh, and despite what some headlines have said in the last 12 months, that does include the police, politicians, and lawyers of the NT. It would be nice to get a voluntary apology, but I'm no longer holding my breath. Did you know that the truth is not a defense for libel in Australia? Ridiculous as that sounds, that is the law as it currently stands. So if you tell the truth about someone, you can be charged with libel if you say something a person has done wrong, but which they want to remain hidden. They can have you charged in court because you told the truth and revealed their dirty dealing. Of course, once you are in the court or under parliamentary privilege, you can say whatever truth or lies you like, and no one can touch you for it. I believe one should be able to tell the truth openly without having to be dragged into court by corrupt people covering their trails. Unfortunately, the way the law stands now, I cannot tell you of any internal deals, deliberate lies, affairs, or favors that I may know of that may make what happened in my case a lot clearer. If I did, I would be charged with libel, and the truth doesn't count in Australia yet. Now it seems like in the centuries to come, there will still be arguments over who said what, where, and how. It seems to me that it is ridiculous that people will still believe all that stuff. Can they not even try to think for themselves, but believe everything they are told to think by someone else? In the last couple weeks, I discover apparently I did twice the amount of time in prison that I actually did, in Berrima prison no less, despite it being quite obvious that I was in Darwin prison and Berrima was only the suburb. Berrima is in New South Wales. Only very subtle changes, you say, and nitpicking. Yes, you are right that the difference is small in one way. It is only one wrong word. Now look at it another way. One prison does not exist at all, and the other one is thousands of kilometers away. Now it becomes not such a small thing, but totally misleading. This is where lies and rumors start. When the truth is dealt with this way, subtly leaving a word out here and changing one there, then it goes into the archives unchallenged because someone else thinks it is too small to matter and another mistake is let slide, or a deliberate omission or addition let go, and you can soon bury the truth so deep that only the most vigilant will ever find it again. Of course, you can start rumors like the one where I was supposed to have hit on a policeman who raided us. They wish. Of course, they didn't bring up that in court. It is much easier to besmirch a person's reputation by starting a rumor or making a statement with no basis in fact that will surface accidentally or on purpose sometime. Bury the fact that until the police told us we had to stay near the tent we had both searched, by belittling and burying it on one hand and on the other use it as an excuse to say that that's when we sneaked away to bury Azaria's body. In the end was so successful that even the jury came to believe we didn't search at all despite testimony to the contrary. It is no wonder that the eyewitnesses resent being disbelieved again and again when they hear and see the stupid lies and innuendos resurface again and again. You see, it is the questions not asked in court that are often the most important. For example, Murray Habby's evidence that he had found what the Aboriginals later confirmed were the tracks of the dingo that took her and the marks where it had put her down. When we met him after he had given his evidence, he told us that he was not supposed to mention this and that only an odd question allowed him to say what he wished about what he had found. With selective or very technical evidence, it is no wonder that modern-day juries are no longer equipped to make an informed decision. We need an updated system for the modern age we live in so that there is less likelihood of the guilty going free because they take advantage of the current inadequacies and the innocent being charged because they expect the truth and fairness that once a court was based on. Now it is just a lethal game. Come on, Australia. Surely you cannot be proud of the fact that you let yourself be duped again and again and come back for more of the same. We used to be a proud nation who saw through corruption and were willing to give a fair go. How many times do you have to be hoodwinked and led along by the nose before you demand something better from our courts, police force, politicians, and media? There are good, honest, truthful people in all of these fields. We need to support them in their struggle to clean up their profession and stand for truth and justice. Hitler got as far as he did because good people didn't wake up to the importance of small details that did not look threatening on their own until the avalanche engulfed all and it was too late to fix.
This seems so like
Now,
yeah, I guess Australia has problems like the US.
painful as it may be, at times we need to stand up and be counted. Change starts with the individual, the family, the local community, the town, the state, the country. It is not easy to decide not to let the small things slip or give in to the bully because of the pain or embarrassment it may cause us. But if you don't do it, you may as well die now. Grow a backbone before the world turns on you. Give up the desire for gossip and sensationalism. Use your brains for something useful. You may surprise yourself what you can achieve. I thank God that the Crown eyewitnesses in my case did have backbones, as did quite a few ordinary Australians who were willing to stand up and say, hey, I don't know what happened, but something is not right here and we need all the facts, which paved the way for new legislation allowing for royal commissions in Australia now. This allows for all of the evidence, rumors, tip-offs, and questions to be exhaustively investigated. The commissioner in our case was asked to find our guilt or innocence. Although we argued otherwise, he did not feel he had been given the power to rule on whether the cause of death was a dingo or not, so did not rule on that. Despite that, the Crown always claimed that it was either me or a dingo. The justice, moraling his findings, said that we would be guilty if, in spite of so many considerations pointing to their innocence, the conclusion was reached that it had been proved beyond reasonable doubt that a dingo did not take the baby. In the light of all the evidence before the commission, I am of the opinion that such a conclusion cannot be reached. Just FYI, this was released right before she actually received the final verdict on innocence. Our family will always remember today as the day truth was dragged in the dirt and trampled upon, but more than that, it is the day that our family was torn apart forever because we lost our beautiful little Azaria. She will always ever be what this ongoing fight for justice has been about. She deserves justice. In light of all the evidence before the commission, this should be reflected on her death certificate and not the open finding that is there now. It is not like the eyewitnesses are dead or that there was not a recommendation from the Royal Commission and the NT Supreme Court who quashed our convictions. It would not take more taxpayers' money to do it. These courts were exhaustive. Why not adopt their recommendations and stop wasting everyone's time, money, and intelligence? Lindy or a dingo was not the NT claim. Their own commission proved it was not me, as I had told them all along, so why don't they accept their own claim now? It makes me wonder, are they really after the truth or just too stubborn or proud to admit that a mistake was made? Who knows the reason, but most of all, please do not forget that the beautiful little girl died tragically on this date 30 years ago.
Wow.
Regards, Lindy. And like I said, this was written before the final inquest
Mm-hmm.
and ruling of their innocence. In that final ruling in 2012, the judge said, I am satisfied that the evidence is sufficiently adequate, clear, cogent, and exact, and that the evidence excludes all other reasonable possibilities to find that what occurred on August 17th was that shortly after Mrs. Chamberlain placed Azaria in the tent, a dingo or dingoes entered the tent, took Azaria, and carried and dragged her from the immediate area. Please accept my sincere sympathy on the death of your special and loved daughter and sister, Azaria. I am so sorry for your loss. Time does not remove the pain and sadness of the death of a child. And that's what should have been said in the beginning, but it took 32 years.
And there's still people today who don't believe it.
Which does not make sense. So I wish I had written down more about this, but I watched another video recently about another family who went camping. This is recent, and their baby boy was taken.
Okay.
They were in a raised camper, and somehow this dingo was able to unhook something, get in there, take the
smart.
baby.
Yeah.
And it was so scary because they heard him outside of their camper. They were like, oh my God. And so they're running out there to go get it. And the father was able to confront the dingo, and he dropped the baby, and he picked up the baby.
Oh my God.
And he was bleeding profusely.
Oh my
They
God.
thought he was going to die. They had to get him airlifted and everything. But before they showed up to help him, and I'm sorry, I wish I had their names. Dang it. I was not prepared. But before they showed up to help this family, the father holding the bleeding baby was surrounded by dingoes. They were ready to attack him to get the baby back. Like they were scared. They were scared. So these dingoes, if they want that, like it's
they're
serious.
very aggressive.
Yes. So it's really sucky that people still believe this, knowing that that has literally been proven to be their intent. They will carry a small child away.
Right. They're wild animals, opportunistic, looking for the smallest of whatever species happens to be in their area if they're hungry.
Right.
It's just, this is such a sad case that people do want to believe the worst.
But for what? For entertainment?
I know. And it makes me question like so many things that we've heard over the years about people or different cases. And it's like, you really can't believe what's put out there. You really need to do the research yourself because they do, like she said, they bury it, they hide it. And once it's in print or once it has been said, they can use those like sound bites or those little texts over and over, even though they're not true anymore.
And if you're only seeing one bit of it and it's the bit that is saying she's guilty, then it's a lie that is perpetuated in history. And you're just going to constantly have to combat with that.
Yeah. And it just, I don't know, this feels so scary in what we have going on in the world right now because people are in echo chambers, hearing one side of the story and not looking at the big picture. And critical thinking. Critical thinking is the most important thing that we can do as human beings. It's something that we have above every other species that lives on this planet. And there's so many people that are just willing to listen to what they're told and not question it. And that's why education's so important. But
exactly. So that's the story. But if you happen to be watching something and jokingly someone says some kind of comment about the dingo got my baby, just remember that little baby was actually taken. And she was eaten. And it's so sad. All media, Hollywood, whatever, made a joke about it.
They did.
It's been on SNL. Like it's been everywhere. Right. That was an actual little baby who lost her life that night. And then her family was tortured for 3 decades.
Traumatized still to this day, every single one of them.
So it's not funny.
Not at all.
So just something to think about next time you hear it. There's an actual life behind that case. And there's actually 2. Because if that man hadn't fallen to his death that day, Lindy would still be in jail, probably for the rest of her life.
It's true. That was the only thing that got her
That was the
off.
only thing that got her off.
Even though there was all this other mountain of evidence that should have gotten her freed.
Because they wanted to cover their asses. And it was only when they were threatened that they let her go.
It's just so scary because it just makes me wonder how many other people are in prison today.
Yes.
For things.
They were a scapegoat.
Yep. Because the cops don't want to admit that they fucked up.
And I bet you a bunch of them are just minorities.
Of course they are because they have no money.
Exactly. They're just like, oh, he did it. We're going to throw him in jail.
This was a pretty white girl.
I know.
And she got treated this way. So you can only imagine how more marginalized people are treated.
Yep. Just a frustrating case, but R.I.P. to that little girl.
Yeah.
What a sad way to go. Scary way to go. I hope she died instantly.
I hope so too. And I just think about like how tragic this family had their baby. They're out for a, fun family adventure. Their baby is dragged off and you think that's the worst nightmare of your life. And then you're thrown in jail and convicted and like still like looked at to this day as like a murderer. Like how?
Exactly.
It's just insane. And I just feel so sorry for this entire family and everything they've gone through. I'm just glad that both Lindy and Michael were cleared.
Yeah. But it's just that stain.
Public opinion. Yeah. They're always going to look questionably at them or whatever.
Just like anybody who spends time in prison at any point, it's like this thing that you're constantly trying to outrun.
Yes.
This stain in your past of anything that had happened. And, we need to be more graceful.
We do. And we also need to realize that we are all just a step away from something like that.
Exactly.
Could happen to us.
this time in life right now is scary because, if we start calling out witches again and
right.
it's one person's word over another, and it doesn't matter how made up and ridiculous it might be, they're thrown at the stake.
Yeah.
Critical thinking, guys. Just think for your damn self.
Don't just believe, and don't go with the pack, because the pack is
Don't.
usually wrong.
Exactly.
From what I've seen. You want to stand out from the herd. And
yeah.
I mean, we have a president-elect right now that's saying he's going to go after anyone who's ever talked against him.
Yeah, that's
He
scary.
wants to fire workers who are not loyalists to him. This shit is real.
It is.
Jessica and I could end up in prison in the next year, honestly, because we've said so much shit on here, but I'm not going to stop saying it because like she even brought up in her letter, Lindy did, it's like the whole rise of Nazism happened because good people did nothing.
They just saw them as small, meaningless little details that all became the avalanche of what it was. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening.
Thank you for working on this story. It was a good one. I did not know much about it other than the movie and the soundbite that comes from that movie.
And I know Meryl Streep won an award for that movie, but I guess you can go watch it. I was really bored. It was really boring.
It was not exciting.
No. But, the true story is sadly much more interesting and sad.
Well, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, until we are here again on Tuesday, you can check us out on social media at Lucid Lab Podcast, all one word. We are on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
And please send in any personal stories that we can read on our Lab Reports episode, or any ideas for any topics or stories that you would like us to cover to lucidlabpodcast@gmail.com.
And hug those little ones you have close, because the world's a scary place, especially if you're going out in the wild. I took my kids camping. I think they were older. Taking a baby camping is scary, but I'm also not going to judge a woman for taking her baby camping, because that's not cool.
No, it's not. And just with that recent one I just mentioned to you, they were avid campers. They knew everything to do, but that dingo still found a way. So
they're wild animals.
Right.
And shit happens.
Shit happens.
People fall off rocks like that poor other man.
But thankfully that little boy was saved.
Yes.
He needed life-saving surgery with everything that happened, but he's a happy little boy today. So thankfully
there are good stories.
But be careful. Anyway.
Yes.
Not that you're out in the outback right now.
No.
Near some dingoes.
I don't think I will ever be in the outback, but wherever you are, just remember.
Stay lucid, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.